Hello, hello. Welcome back to my podcast. Had a hell of a week this week. Usually the lighting would be a lot better. I generally use the natural lighting. Um, Unfortunately, today, as I'm sure you can tell, I'm quite tired. It's really late. I have had a hell of a week and I'm having to do this quite late at night. So it's just the light that's in the room. Please forgive it. Hopefully next week I'll have the available time to do this. So this is kind of a bit of a rushed version of the podcast. Hopefully there won't be too many of these. But what's important, I'd like to think, is that it's consistent. If you expect an episode on a Monday, I should get that episode out for you. Today's the fourth episode. So I'm going to talk about the four elements. We're going to dive back into the Zodiac a little bit and explain what the elements mean, being fire, air, water, and earth. How they manifest within the three different phases. Those phases are Cardinal, the beginner, the birth, fixed, which is the stubborn ones of the zodiac, the most like the season or the element. The season most represents the element of the fixed sign, and then the mutable, the destroyer, the one who gives way for the next. It'd be the if we look at it in regards to the sun cycle. The mutable is the sign that takes us into the equinox or into the solstice. Thank you for tuning in. You might have noticed on my channel recently I've been doing these astrological updates. This podcast is a way for me to be open and honest with the audience. I did a bit of research into how to reach the widest audience, how to use the algorithm of YouTube, and one of the things that came back was that YouTube pushes the short videos, the less than a minute, more than it does the others, probably to compete with TikTok. I don't mess with TikTok. Not interested in anything the Chinese government has got to put out, whether it's TikTok or social conditioning. What can I say? What can't I say? But let's just say I'm not on board with the CCP. That's for sure. So yeah, I've been thinking, well, how can I make this sort of algorithm work for me? And well, one thing I can do is every day put out a minute video. So I thought, well, there's 7 days to the week. There's 7 wandering stars. I know which day relates to which star. So I will give you an update on what that star's doing on that day, and then if you look over it over the course of a week, you'll get an update on each of the 7 planets in a little short 1 minute bite. I hope that's been useful for people. Please give me any feedback that you might have, and also if there's any other little snappy 1 minute videos that you would like to see from me, let me know. Anything that can help the channel reach a wider audience, that people that might be interested in this sort of stuff. I'm just going to drink a cup of tea because, as I said, it is late, way too late for coffee, but I need something to get me through the show. Saw an interesting video today I only watched a little bit of it, and it was a discussion between someone who was Jewish and somebody who was an astrologer and had found God and gone into Christianity. And I thought that was quite interesting because it's always sort of been my interpretation that the two are the same in a way. Like, obviously not directly. There are some doctrines behind the teachings that are quite different, but I've always found the Bible to be quite an astrological book, and not actually to work against it, but to work with it, to support it. Um, and I've always embraced the Creator, what certain texts may call God or Jehovah or Yahweh. Um, so it's interesting for me to see that there's an astrologer who moved from astrology and then into Christianity, because I feel like Christianity is very much a part of it. So that's just something I've found quite interesting recently, and has made me think a bit, like, is it that I'm missing something, or is it that I've seen something that somebody else didn't see? So if there are any Christians out there who would like to have a conversation and talk about the differences and the similarities behind a lot of the teachings, to do it in an open discussion. I'm not interested in arguing with anybody. But if somebody would like to have an interesting and educational discussion based on these things, I would very much be up for that, because I'd be interested to see why there seems to be such a divide between the two, when I personally see them as very much supporting of each other. Anyway, let's get through to these elements within the Zodiac. Let's get to the teaching part. My rambling has somewhat come to an end. Just had a few things on my mind there. And please bear with me. This is not going to be the most energized of my podcasts. I've had a hell of a day, had a hell of a week, really. Ups and downs, and you'll probably get that from the poem that I release at the end of this. Although I have to admit, it's not yet recorded. I'm not quite sure how or where I'm going to do that. Hopefully I'll get it done in time. But the first element I'm going to talk about is fire. So I'm just queuing up the next one. The next slide. This looks quite alarming, this frame, doesn't it? Looks like a warning sign. And I guess we are taught to fear fire, in a way. And in a way, there's a reason for that, for sure. I do think it's a shame that we don't have, most people, in a way, including myself, unfortunately, doesn't have a log burner in the home anymore. A nice open fire to sit round. So the symbol for fire is quite literally the triangle pointing upwards. The way I, because all the symbols are a form of triangle, the way I remember this one is because fire will always rise, and it will try to consume. It will always try to break free and rise up and eat whatever it can. And that's why it's, for me, the triangle that just rises upwards. So when we look at the element of fire, actually looking at fire itself teaches us a lot about it, that it will consume. It can't be contained. Maybe we could argue that the fire stove is a contained fire, or the pilot light on a boiler is contained, but it has to be open to the point of a gaseous must feed it. Water will always put it out, and the remains of the fire will fertilize the earth. So all of them are connected in this way. And a natural fire can't really be contained as such. We can build rocks around it and keep it within a circle, which we should do. If we ever go camping or set a fire outdoors, we should always make sure there are non-flammable things. And we have to do that because of its need to consume. It's passionate, it's fiery, it's hot, it will burn. The only real one of the elements that like you strictly cannot touch, you cannot hold with your skin, it will burn. And maybe it's the most tantalizing, the one we most want to touch. Perhaps there's the reason there. So when we have planets that are wandering stars, or whatever you want to call these beautiful entities that travel across the heavens, they are touched by the flame, the furiosity, the passion that is fire. It's usually short-lived. Those that have a lot of fire in them tend to be passionate really quickly, almost too quickly. Generally need to learn a bit of patience, especially when it comes to the cardinal fires, which is Aries. The fixed fires tend to be too stubborn in the passions, too hard to move. They'll generally bite if you try to get in the way of the passions. The bite of the lion, that would be Leo. And then we've got the mutable fire, the fire that wants to fertilize and wants to give. And this is where we come with Sagittarius, the hero, the mutable side to it. All the fire signs, there's 3 of them, they trine each other. So they're very supportive of each other. So, and if you've got a planet in each of them and it fits within a certain degree, depending on how quickly that planet moves, that would be considered a grand trine in fire. That would create a very passionate person. Obviously, it would depend on the type. For example, Mars is quite a fiery planet, and it represents Aries very well. The Sun is another fiery planet. This rules Leo, and then Jupiter also rules Sagittarius. Jupiter and Mars both also rule a water sign, which is quite interesting, as water would be the direct opposite of fire. So the next element would be air. Now for me, it's the triangle with the line through it, and this is because we can contain air. With fire, if you was to put it in a bottle and close the lid, it would feed until it can no longer and then put itself out. Whereas the air will just sit in that bottle, so that it represents the line for me. That's at least how I remember it. It's not an exact science. It's just right. It's going up because air rises generally. Hot air does anyway. And then the line because it will rest within a container. That helps me to differentiate it. So air's quite an incredible one. It will fill the room. It doesn't really want to be contained. Whilst it can be contained, it's not settled there. The second you open it, it's out. It's information. It's sociable. You just light an incense and watch it fill the room. Slowly it gets into everywhere, every nook and cranny, everywhere that there's a gap, there will be air. Second you open a form of vacuum the air will just rush in to take its place. It wants to be everywhere. The cardinal air, which is Libra, wants to find the balance within the room, wants to settle and find balance to create its change. The fixed sign, Aquarius, wants to bring something forth, wants to provide, wants to move something from one place to another. And then the mutable Gemini wants to communicate, wants to pass on, wants to learn, wants to get into deep conversations. So yeah, just by studying air, and you can tell that whilst air gives you the ability to breathe, a strong gust of wind will take your breath away. There's two sides to it. So it's obviously all of these elements, to say they're essential is stating the obvious. Is very much essential for the breath, and also for being spiritual. The single best thing you can do when you're touched by fire, the best thing you can do is to take in the deep breath of air. The wisdom, the balance the lungs, be the Libran. The symbology, if you look for at the air signs, Libra being the two scales, Gemini being the twins, and Aquarius being the two waves of water, there's always these two parts to them, the two lungs that breathe. That's also something to consider with air. So air feeds fire, and whilst all the air signs will trine, just like any of the elements will, they sextile with fire, which essentially means they'll create, like the Star of David in the charts, they'll make like a semi-triangle, which is another supportive structure, although generally requires communication. So it's important that the fire signs and the air signs talk, they express themselves, and they hold space for each other to listen. And if they do that, then they create incredible bonds between the two. One is needed for the other to survive, for sure. Moving on to the water signs then, and now we have our first, what could be conceived as an upside down triangle. With water. Now I remember I look at this water will always go downhill until it finds its level. It will always go down. So we have water pointing down. Obviously I'm using the colour blue, as that's how we generally perceive large bodies of water. Obviously clear water would be completely transparent, just like air. But I already used the white or the slightly grey for air. So when we see water, it can be still, but it can also crash. It can be incredibly emotional. The moon pulls it. This is where we see the cardinal phase of water with Cancer, which is ruled by the moon. Incredibly emotional, nurturing, wants to look after people, wants to take care. With a fixed sign, it becomes Scorpio, which is quite water. You could consider to be quite quite feminine. Both of the upside down triangles, if you want to look at them that way, are both feminine, and the two triangles pointing upwards you could consider to be male. It's funny, isn't it, how like the second I said male and female, I had to think about how someone might take that, and it's just crazy that life's got that way. But I'm talking in regards to the expression. Let's just leave it there, really. So water is quite feminine, but Scorpio would be the odd one out, the masculine of them, because it's ruled by Mars, the divine masculine, to Venus's divine feminine. So that's the fixed sign. It represents the fall or autumn, and this you could see being quite like the river, being the sting of the tail that will pull you along with the current. There's no stopping it. It's going to go where it's going to go. You can try and divert a river, and obviously we do that for cities and things, but I would think that on the grand scheme of Gaia, of the earth, thousands and thousands of years, really the water will cut through where it wants to cut through. It has an incredible amount of power, do the rivers. And then the mutable phase being Pisces, this is where water starts to break through illusion, how it spirals. You can meditate a great deal with water. It can bring forth many truths to you. Yeah, with any of these elements, really, if you want to try and understand them, firstly understand what the phases mean, which we're definitely going to get to, but also just study them. Study how water, how when we push water through a tap, it comes out aggressive and traumatized, and then when we let it settle, it's almost like it's taken that deep breath and just come to settle. And then how we can disturb it and manipulate it, and how all it ever wants to do is just find its level. And then we get to the most material. Really, we've gone through air. Really would be the most ethereal. You can't even see it. And then we go fire, because you can't really hold it. And then we get to the more material sides with water. And then the most material, what material actually is, being earth. So how I remember the triangle here is that earth is down, but it's the level that we're on, hence the line in the middle. This is just a little cue for me to remember which triangle represents which of the elements. So the earth signs tend to be slower pace, slower moving. In fact, the earth itself, when you observe it, it requires cause and effect more than the others do. You would have to move the earth in order for it to move, or consciousness would have to, plant life or animal life would have to actually move the earth, or it would just stay. And would like become rock, or calcify over time. Solidify is probably a better term. So these signs are generally the hardest to move. Its cardinal sign is Capricorn, which is what takes us into the winter stages in the sun cycle in a way. The fixed sign is Taurus, and talk about fixed, that literally that is Taurus. The earth doesn't move in a way, and then you add the element of it being fixed, and then its mutable sign is Virgo, where Virgo is like the teacher, the maiden, the virgin in the heavens, the one who wants to provide something. So there's the symbols for the elements. The top left, the triangle pointing upwards, is fire. Just wants to rise. but also, stuck to the ground, which would be the fuel. It's fixed to the fuel but wants to rise. Air, which will rise but will be contained, hence the line going through it. I mean, this is just what helps me remember them again. And then the bottom left is water. Water will always go to its lowest point. It will find its lowest point. And then earth, which is beneath us, but is the level that we rest on. Hence the line. So I like to use the sine wave because it can represent the in breath and out breath, the heartbeat, the up and down, just life really can be very easily observed using a sine wave. It's a good explanational tool. So the cardinal is the start. It's the cause that causes the effect. So the signs that are cardinal, when added to their element, are the bringers, the beginners, the starters. The Aries is the ram that knocks over, causes the chain of events, breaks through the door that starts the cycle off. The fixed sign then becomes that season that we are in. It's the center point. It's the most generally they're the calmest of the months. They're the I don't want to say thinkers, but they're the settlers. They have reached where they want to get to in the cycle. And then the mutable comes to destroy, to pass on, to bring peace, to bring into terms, usually where, like seasonal harvesting would be, and stuff like that, as we would prepare the grounds for the season to come. The mutable you would refertilize. So I'm going to go through them as their zodiacs. I only touched on them briefly before, but now let's bring through the fire signs. So we have cardinal being Aries with fire. So once we understand what cardinal is, that is, it's the beginner, it's the change, it's the cause, the chemical reaction. When you add it with fire, so we get change and we get the start, we get the bringer with fire, with passion and fury and heat. This is what gives us Aries. And then once fire has sort of peaked, which is Leo, the summer, the right smack bang in the middle of summer, where we generally reach our hottest days, at least in the northern hemisphere anyway. I can't speak for the people who live on the equator and in the southern hemisphere, because that's not something I've experienced. I can only share my own experiences and bring that to the table. I wouldn't want to make assumptions or seem facetious, but Aries is my summer. It's the hottest months. It's whilst it's stubborn, it's not stubborn in the same way that, for example, a Taurus would be, where it's hard to move. It's stubborn in its mindset, in its passions, in its eternal fire. You can't put out an Aries, and if you do, you'll see the lion. And then the mutable being Sagittarius. Sagittarius just wants to help somebody else, just wants to be the hero, really, Sagittarius in the heavens is the arrow. Now that arrow, I believe to be an analogy. It can be seen as Thor's hammer because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, who I believe to be the wandering star, the manifestation, the archetype of Thor, and also Zeus. It could be Zeus's lightning bolt. I also see correlations in the Arthurian tales, the King Arthur from Britain, where I'm from, obviously. And in this regard, it would be the sword, the Excalibur, the sword. It's the weapon, the hero, you know, the mutable that will slay the dragon, that will slay the cycle to make way for the new. So we'll move on to air now. With air, we have its cardinal being Libra. Directly opposite Aries' fire. So Aries comes, the fire comes to start it off, to knock over the scales, and Libra comes in to find that balance before the air can rise and take off. The air wants to settle, wants to find that balance. Once it started its cycle, it will then bring the waters, which air does really. And Aquarius, the fixed sign, means, well, it's aqua and Aries, it's water and air combined in, I believe, it's Latin terms. Aquarius, it wants to, so the air wants to provide, it wants to bring in, whether that's bringing in change or bringing in knowledge or bringing in actual water. Aquarius is also the age that we are now going into. If there's anything I could encourage this generation to do, it would be to study the water, study the air, sure, but understand the purpose of Aquarius is to be the bearer of water. And I think there's a great mystery and intelligence and just magic to water that could really support this new age that we're moving into. And then Gemini comes to pass on, to be the mutable sign. So Gemini is you know, as air, it's quite sociable. It wants to move around. It wants to share what it's got, to pass over the things that it's acquired through its phases. Oops, I've gone to the wrong one. I'm back. I'm back. I'm so sorry for that. That was a technical error on my part, and quite frankly, double so, because we weren't on Earth, we was on water. I hope you're still tuned in and you haven't bailed on me. I would have potentially stopped and re-recorded this. However, like I say, it's late. I don't know if I'm going to get another chance to record this episode. I've still got the poem to do, and I've got a lot of things to do with my personal life that I won't really get into. But I'm a bit up against it at the minute, so I've just got to keep going. Only 2 slides to go now. So Cancer is the cardinal, so the bringer, and it's water. It's nurturing. It brings in the healing. Really, it's the mother's sign. It's ruled by the moon. It's the bringer of care, of support. The fixed sign, the stubborn one, the one that you can't stop its movement, its emotion, its need to steady its course, is Scorpio. Scorpio is the fixed sign. It's the autumn season, which is the fall, the tail of the scorpion. There's no stopping it. It's also generally quite a wet season. This is where we get the autumn showers. Is within Scorpio. It's stubborn in the way that, in a similar way to fire, but whereas fire is passion and fiery and wants to do what it wants to do, Scorpio is more direct with its emotional state. They can somewhat seem quite cold to people, but that's because they have a really strong sense of their own emotions, and it's more empowering than it maybe is with the other water signs. The other water signs have much more conflict with their emotional state, as does water. But when we look at Scorpio, which I generally look at as the rivers of the zodiac. I mean, even with its sort of M and then tail that goes off, it just reminds me of the rivers. It's much more direct and has that touch of masculinity to it, with it being ruled by Mars. And then we have Pisces. Pisces, to finish it off, Pisces can be a very conflicted sign with the two fishes swimming against each other. But also, so there's a lot of stress with these two fishes. But ultimately, if you start to realize that the two fishes aren't working against each other, they're actually working for each other, and start to become inspired by the quote unquote stresses, that you get to break illusion. You get to see through the waters, see through the shimmers, and actually begin to see the full picture. So the mutable, to pass it on with water, it more manifests as the ability to see, providing you're not paying too much attention to the illusion of these fishes, the manifestation of these stresses that life often gives. So to pass on, but with the water signs are quite conflicted, as water is, as it rises and falls and it flows and it settles, but it also crashes and it can be aggressive. These are felt with all of the water signs. Just when it's fixed, it's more direct, it's less visual. They seem more like they're straightforward, maybe even sometimes more rude. And it's not that they are rude, not at all. They just have a keener sense of where their emotions are pulling them. Whereas the other two signs, the Cancer, the bringer, and especially with Pisces, the destroyer, there's more energy to it, there's more stresses to it. And then that takes us back to the earth signs, where now it looks like you can hear me and you can see me, so that's great. I have to admit, I am still learning this OBS system. So the earth sign is Capricorn. It's probably the roughest of them. Of all the seasons, is the Capricorn season that takes us into winter. All of the leaves now are falling onto the ground. The ground is becoming hardened, and you've got to get up the hill, which is the most material of hills because it's earth. So Cardinal is Capricorn being the cardinal Earth, because it's the most material, it's the hardest to climb. It's the harshest of them in many ways. Then Taurus, being Earth. Now Earth is the spring. Taurus is the springtime. It's the meadow and the calmness. They're very much about their home, and they're hard to move, especially when they don't want to be moved. They're going wide circles. They don't want to change direction too quickly. But they're incredibly loyal, as you know, as is the Earth. You just have to understand that they are the most fixed sign of the most fixed element. Um, just like Aries is the most fiery sign of the most cardinal phase. You can't get in the way of an Aries. You just have to sort of run along them and see what happens. Taurus is then the most fixed, the most hardest to move, but you know, you have to approach them with a lot of care and patience in that regard. And then we get to my beloved Virgo, the mutable, and Virgo wants to bring the media. You know, it wants to bring the information. Shouldn't really say information. Wants to bring the teaching forward. Wants to pass on what it's learned. Would learn specifically to pass it on, so that it can have educated discussions, and you know, more likely to study absolutely everything about a certain subject, so that it can have those educated discussions or debates. Boom, there we did it. And this is the first one where I've not brought some kind of mythology or theology to the table. I did think it was going to be a bit of a lengthy one, where I'm looking at it, it's about 43 minutes as it is. Um, I know I'm at a slower pace anyway, but I'm having to really work the mind to get something even comprehensible out of it. It is quite late. Um, Obviously, there's been issues, you know, with the weather. We've had some incredible snows, um, and that's had an effect. But there's also other things alongside that's had an effect, and that's just life, isn't it? Sometimes these podcasts will come easy, and sometimes you'll have to grind them. But I am going to make this commitment that on a Monday you can expect to get another episode of the podcast. This week I dropped the top 5 ways or top 5 reasons why your manifestations aren't working. I hope that helps some people out there, just to, you know, think about how they should manifest, and when they do put manifestations out there, how they are manifesting, but perhaps maybe you're not paying attention to them in the way, and maybe think about how you reword or change your expectations of those. Wow, that's a cold cup of tea now, but we are 45 minutes in, so I pray that there's going to be a poem directly after this. Like I said, I haven't had chance to record it as of the recording of this episode, but that's why these don't go out live. Um, Also, you know, I'm as of the recording of this, I think when this goes live, I might have just crossed 1,000 views, and if I have, thank you to everybody who spent any second watching my videos and stuff. It really does mean something. Um, Let me know what you think to the 1 minute shorts, please. I know I've had a few blessings regard to them, but is that something that you consistently like to see? That every morning about 9:30, 10 o'clock, you can look at my channel and find a little 1 minute bite of what the planet is doing. So for example, on a Monday when this goes live, you will find one about the moon because it's the moon's day. The Sunday will have been the sun's day. Saturday you could have found out about Saturn on Saturn's day, and so on and so forth. Well, I'm going to leave this podcast here. I don't believe there was any questions really given this week or asked. Please do ask any questions that you've got on astrology. I still have a few to answer really with the salts and the houses, but they need an episode all to themselves, maybe even more than one, to be fair. But yeah, thank you for listening. I hope that this has helped to understand what the elements mean, and really, if you know the element and you know that and you understand the phases and you can put them two together in your mind, you will get that associated zodiac. So if you think of water and then you think of what it means to be fixed and how that could affect water, you are essentially thinking of Scorpio. And if you've seen my other video, which is episode 2, Intro to the Zodiac, you understand that the Zodiac is actually a cycle. It manifests in every single walk of life. It's just that, the macro, the absolute biggest scale, the heavens, it's presented as stars. In the micro, let's just say the human body is represented as the 12 systems to the body. Well, I'm going to leave it there because otherwise this video might end up going on more than an hour, and that was never my intention. My intentions were 30-minute podcast, easily digestible podcast episodes, and I think I've only actually made one that's been under half an hour. So thank you very much for listening. God bless you. Good night. Enjoy the poem.
Hit the bottom again, flat out on the floor. Hit it pretty hard. Now I'm feeling pretty sore. Can't stay down. Can't be crying 'cause I'm low. What goes up comes back down, and as above, so below. The sun rose true. It gifted me another day. So I'll rise too and make some peace with yesterday. Feel like Sisyphus, just wish this rock would stay. But back to the bottom, 'cause I got some debts to pay. Never said it was easy, wouldn't play it if it was. So I can't complain every time my backside hits the moss. Reminds me that I'm mortal and to appreciate the loss. Take time to breathe in deeply and give respects to the boss. Hit the bottom once again, but he gave another day of it. So I will count my blessings and get myself up out the pit. Get this rock rolling up the hill. Get it to the summit. So when you see me fall again, I'll smash it like a comet. Listen to the message. I'm trying to speak in riddle. When you fall to the bottom, you're being tested in the middle. Quitting, it's not an option, it's an illusion, like a riddle. So ride the flow, stand up tall, and take it till you cripple.